Good afternoon, everyone. Friendly neighborhood. Sir PJ here, and welcome to week 2 of our course. Last week, we talked about what training and development are. Today, we move to the next big question. How do we know what training is actually needed? That is where training needs analysis, or TNA, comes in. Before any organization designs training, it should first ask whether training is really the solution. Sometimes the problem is training, but sometimes it is process, supervision, tools. In other words, not every workplace problem needs a seminar. Sometimes the problem is not the employee. Sometimes the problem is the printer, the process, or the supervisor who says, "Figure it out." Training needs analysis is the process of identifying whether there is a gap between what employees are currently doing and what they are expected to do. It helps organizations determine if training is needed, what kind of training is needed, and who needs it. A TNA is not just a guessing game. It is a systematic way of finding out the real cause of a performance issue. If employees are underperforming, the answer may be training, but it may also be lack of equipment, unclear expectations, or weak supervision. TNA matters because training is expensive in time, money, and effort. If the organization trains people without first identifying the real need, it may waste resources on the wrong solution. A good TNA helps ensure that training is targeted, relevant, and aligned with organizational goals. It also increases the chance that employees will actually use what they learn. Without TNA, training can become the corporate version of shotgun advice, hoping something sticks. That is not a strategy. That is a gamble. A complete TNA usually looks at 3 levels: organizational, task, and person. These help us understand where the performance gap is coming from. The first question is the organization facing a problem or goal that training can help solve? The second question is, what tasks or competencies are required? The third question is, which individuals need training and what exactly do they lack? These 3 levels help us avoid making a training program too broad or too vague. Organizational analysis looks at the bigger picture. It asks what the organization is trying to achieve and whether training supports that goal. For example, if a company wants better customer satisfaction, the training team should ask whether poor customer service is the issue or whether the real problem is staffing, policy, or equipment. This level helps align training with the mission, vision, and priorities of the organization. If the goal is to fix customer complaints, but the real problem is the broken system, then training people to smile harder will not solve the issue. Smiles are nice, but systems matter too. Task analysis focuses on the job itself. It identifies the duties, steps, standards, and competencies required to perform a task well. For example, if employees are supposed to process documents in a digital system, task analysis will examine every step they need to follow. What do they need to know? What do they need to do? What errors happen? What standard is expected? This helps the trainer design content that is specific and practical. Task analysis keeps us from designing one-size-fits-all training, which usually fits nobody properly. Like a free t-shirt in a school event, technically clothing, but not exactly a perfect fit. Person analysis focuses on the individual employee. It asks who needs training and what kind of gap they have. Some employees may lack knowledge, others may lack skill, and some may need attitude or behavior change. For example, one employee may not know the correct procedure. Another may know it, but still not apply it correctly. That means the training solution may differ. This is why a TNA should not assume that everyone needs the same intervention. 2 employees may both say, I don't get it. But for one, it means lack of knowledge, and for the other, it means I was not listening because I was hungry. Very different causes, very different solutions. To conduct a TNA, we need data. We cannot rely only on assumptions or complaints. Common sources include interviews with employees and supervisors, surveys, direct observation, performance reports, and job descriptions. The goal is to gather evidence about what is actually happening in the workplace. Good training decisions come from good information. Training without data is like diagnosing an illness by asking, "Does it feel academic?" That is not enough. We need evidence. A simple TNA process has 5 steps. First, define the problem clearly. Second, gather data from reliable sources. Third, identify the performance gap. Fourth, determine the root cause. Fifth, decide whether training is the right solution. This final step is important because not every issue should become training. If the issue is poor equipment, broken policy, or unclear instructions, the solution may be operational rather than instructional. Sometimes the best training recommendation is actually no training needed. That may sound strange, but it is a very professional answer. Let us use a simple example. Suppose a government office is receiving complaints about slow service. The first instinct may be to say, train the employees, but TNA asks deeper questions. Is the delay caused by lack of knowledge? Is the software too slow? Are too many people being served by too few staff? Are the steps too complicated? If the real issue is the process, then training alone will not fix it. That is why TNA is so important. You cannot train someone to be faster if the system itself moves like it is still loading from 2007. Once the needs are identified, the results of the TNA become the basis for the training design. The trainer can now write objectives, choose content, select methods, and design evaluation tools. Without TNA, training design becomes random. With TNA, training becomes focused and purposeful. This is why TNA is the foundation of instructional design. In short, no TNA, no direction, and when training has no direction, it becomes a very expensive guessing activity. To summarize, training needs analysis is the process of identifying the real gap between current and desired performance. It helps organizations decide whether training is needed and what kind of training should be created. The 3 levels of analysis, organizational, task, and person, give us a full picture of the problem. If we do TNA well, training becomes more effective, more relevant, and more useful. So today's lesson is simple. Before we train people, we need to know what they actually need. Otherwise, we are just giving lessons to the wrong problem. TNA prevents sayang pera, waste of money, effective, relevant, and useful. Now let us talk. Think of an organization, school, or office where people are not performing well. Would training solve the problem immediately, or would a needs analysis be necessary first? Pause the video and try to explain your answer using the 3 levels of TNA. There is no need to be perfect. Just show that you can think like a training professional. Pause now. TNA helps us understand the current performance and helps organizations decide if training is the actual missing link by identifying the gap and getting to where the performance needs to be. The 3 levels of TNA are organization level, task level, person level. Skipping TNA is like giving paracetamol to someone with a broken leg. The important idea to remember is that training should be based on evidence, not guesswork. Your task is to identify a gap, think about its cause, and decide whether training is the best solution. That is the beginning of professional training design.